This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration. This is Remote Daily, an oasis of innovation. For your mind, your soul, your heart, connect, act, recharge with Remote Daily. This is Remote Daily.
Was this the rhythm of the New York subway, or am I wrong? Thank you, Eleanor and Dario, and welcome to our guest, HR leader, consultant and Next Steps HR partners, former executive at Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Citi, PNC, and New York Life, and Remote Daily godfather, family member, and friend. Welcome, Joe Weldon. Joe, thanks so much for joining us on Remote Daily.
Thank you. Thanks, Felix.
What should I say, Joe? It's an honor to interview you here on behalf of the global community of Remote Daily that has a memory of this day, and the chat is still filling up with stories and stories. How are you feeling today on this date? Just looking at this date and looking at your inner Joe, your soul.
It's usually, I feel the same every 9/11. I wake up feeling really heavy and sad and need to be quiet for about 3 or 4 hours. And then I start getting messages from people who were there with me that day. And then this is just an outpouring of emotion and love. So, and then at the end of the day, I start to get a little angry because there's not a collective remembrance, I don't think, and then I go back to feeling sad and heavy, and then tomorrow's another day.
So may I ask, you get angry? Why?
It's because it's so heavy for me and for a lot of New Yorkers. I think I want everyone to experience that, and the memory and the loss and the love. And I think some people go through their day not realizing and forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And what do you do to personally commemorate? Do you have any kind of rituals or things you do on that day every year?
Yeah, I generally, like I said, I am quiet for like 3 or 4 hours, and I try to remember and go back and experience those feelings that I went through that morning and that afternoon. So I try to recreate that. And then I touch base with my kids, my ex-wife, and the people that I was with that day. Just a little ping on a text and say, thinking of you. As a matter of fact, I just got 2 more today. And so it's a way of remembrance. And I don't see these people throughout the year. It's just that today is the day we touch base.
You said to me, even after 19 years, 9/11 feels like yesterday to you. How do you explain that part of the feeling, this sort of feeling of it still being very recent?
I think as a New Yorker, for me, it's context with everything. I walk down the street and I'll look at the new skyscrapers that are going up, and I think, oh, the Twin Towers. Or I can't help but when I walk downtown and think about, oh my God, what was it like? So it's context for how I think about things. And so given that, it doesn't seem that long ago. It's like I look at my kids. My kids are 25 and 22. I still think they're 7 and 4, when I still talk to them. It's like, what happened? Where did the time go? So, yeah.
Speaking of time, there has been a lot of conversation about 9/11 over the last couple of months in COVID-19 related lockdown, how people tapping into into their feelings, into resilience, into survival, of course, regarding, 9/11 and also other catastrophes in New York City. When over the last couple of months was your inner 9/11 being triggered?
Well, there's two things I think, and maybe I'll talk about this later. One is what I didn't realize I had in me when 9/11 hit was this survival mode, this call to action. This is what we got to do. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. Boom, boom, boom. And when the coronavirus hit, I felt the same way. Okay, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to prepare this. We got to prepare this. Right. But the interesting thing for me, a trigger, like a PTSD trigger or trauma for me, are hovering helicopters. And whenever I hear a hovering helicopter, it affects me physically. My hair goes up in the back of my neck, like something, what's going on? And so with the Black Lives Matter protests, there's been a lot of hovering helicopters, and that's kind of caused me to be a little unsettled. And that's directly related to 9/11.
We asked in the beginning, creating this flow of stories here in the chat. Where were you when it happened? And as we have heard from Anne and others, some were incredibly close, and you were one of them. Where were you when it happened? How do you recall the first moment?
I was, well, for those of you who are in New York, you remember it was a beautiful day. It was an absolutely stunning day, which I think it's in people's vocabulary too. When they experience a day like that, they're like, oh, remember, this is like a 9/11 day, right? Because it was a perfect weather day. I had a conference call at 7:30. I was working at Merrill Lynch at the time, and in a conference room next to my office, which was a glass like corner office, and about, I don't know, I forget what time it was in the morning, and we had heard a loud grinding noise, like really loud grinding. And the two women I was with, we kind of all like, what the? And then we didn't see the plane. What we saw was it was an explosion. We saw the fireball because it was right across the street. And what I caveat this by saying I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the imagination, but what I saw was the fireball and then the lobby explode. Now, a little bit of background. I was actually there I was working for Salomon Brothers when the '96 bombing happened. So when I saw the explosion, my immediate thought was, okay, they got us again. This is a timed explosion. And then people came running into the conference room and said, oh no, the plane hit. And I remember arguing with this person saying, no, the plane didn't hit. It was a timed explosion. And for me, what struck me, the severity, I was trying to figure out what's going on. And then we saw people in the lobby two people came out engulfed in flames. And then I thought, okay, something serious is going on. And then somebody was trying to get a radio, and everybody was in the conference room because we had a clear view of what was happening.
And your best explanation for these two explosions that you witnessed was that the building somewhat, or the fuel.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I do think there was jet fuel that went down the shaft of the elevators and then exploded. And the mind's eye, memory plays different tricks, and timing, right? Timing is different. And so when we heard the grinding noise again, that same familiar sound, we saw the second plane bank and go right in. Now, again, as I recall in my mind's eye, that was 20 seconds. In reality, it was probably a second and a half, 2 seconds. But we saw that second plane go in, and then we saw the fireball, and that was like, okay, we got to get out. And the two women I was with, because I lived 2 blocks away. So I grabbed them, I said, we got to go. I live on Murray Street. And
2 blocks.
2
like
blocks.
A stone throw.
Yeah. You could see the towers from our window. I said, let's go back to the apartment. We'll turn on the news, figure out what's going on. And when we got down the street, it was just bedlam. I mean, as you can imagine. And that's when I was not panicking. I only started to panic when I got home and I realized no one was home. So my wife and 2 kids who were 6 and 4 at the time were not there. And so I ran to school. I remember I told, so Ida Vogelzang, she knows these people because we were working on the same team together. So it was Mish Michaud and Cheryl Margulis. And I said to these 2 women, I said, stay right here. I got to go to school to see if my family's there. And I ran into the school and a teacher looked at me. I'll never forget it. She was very calm. She had all the shades drawn. And there were like 5 kids sitting Indian style. And she was reading a book, very calm. And I walked into the room and the teacher looked at me and she said, my daughter's name was Sarah. And she said, Sarah never came to school today. Don't know where she is. So then panic started. So now I don't know where they are. So I ran back to the apartment. So it was about 45 minutes of, I don't know what to do. And meanwhile, I'm outside running around, looking at people and trying not to look up, because when you looked up, that's when you saw some horrific things and the sounds. So it was those 45 minutes I never want to relive. It was the most frightened I've ever been in my life. And then, and if I can continue, we saw, so I had to stay at the apartment because I figured they'd come back. And then we saw police running towards us. And when you see police officers running towards you, frightened, you're like, okay, something bad's about to happen. And we thought it was the 3rd plane. And so we were convinced the 3rd plane, but we didn't hear the grinding noise. But then we realized the 1st building was coming down. And so we ran, and if the debris came down and went south. So I ran north, obviously. And divine intervention hit, because as I was running, all of a sudden it dawned on me, I know where they are. I know exactly where they are. And they were at a friend's apartment 4 blocks north. So I ran there and I said to the super, I got to get up to the 4th floor. And we were up, and that's where they were. And they were with another family, friends of ours. And again, I was so angry because the emotions were just so much. I was like, where have you been? And the funny story is later we learned that my ex-wife, or my wife and my daughter got into a fight about what to wear to school that day. And they were late. And so when they walked out, they were oblivious to what was going on and then just saw debris and didn't know what was going on. So they dove in, they went into a subway and thought that was a mistake. And so then they went to friends. And keep in mind, there's no cell phone service. So there's nothing to be in contact with. So we went to this apartment, and then, as I said earlier, you go in survival mode, right? And I said, okay, we had 5 kids, a dog, 4 adults. And I said, all right, we're going to be here for a long time. Put the kids in front of the TV. How much money do we have? How much food do we have? We got to get water, beer, bread, beer, more beer, and so there was a bodega downstairs. And so I took the money and I went down to this, and the bodega's still there, this market. And I went and I grabbed a basket, started filling it up. And then you heard the scream, this Asian woman scream. And the 2nd building had come down, and it was blowing north. So it went from day to night. And I ducked in, and I remember as I dove into a salad bar, like underneath the salad bar, and you had this felt like an earthquake. We got up and covered in dust, went back up to the apartment, and within probably 15 minutes, the police and the firemen knocked on the apartment, or the super came up and said, you all have to evacuate, there's a gas leak. And what I learned about later on from a lot of police and firemen, if you want to evacuate anybody, tell them there's a gas leak. There may not have been a gas leak. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was, but it's like they had to evacuate everyone south of Canal Street. So we went, and if you can picture, some of you were downtown, maybe you remember this. You had all these emergency folks running downtown, and then all the residents of Tribeca and downtown marching north. So it was like this refugee camp, just trying to find a place. And we had a shopping cart. I don't know where we had a shopping cart. And we're like, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you staying? And we went up to another person's apartment, and they said, you can come up, but we're being evacuated too. So we ended up staying with friends of a friend's. We didn't even know them when we stayed at a place in Soho. Got there about, I don't know what time it was. Put the kids aside, got them something to eat, and then try to figure out what to do. And, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, we tried to go down and help out, and we couldn't. They wouldn't let us. About 5 o'clock in the morning, we were able to get police officers to let us in to get our car in a garage. Took the kids out, woke them up about 6 o'clock in the morning, and drove out of the city to New Jersey to my in-laws at the time. Still in the clothes that we were wearing.
Joe, I'm so grateful for you, just, on behalf of everybody who's from New York and has lived through this day so closely, to share this. And you also brought 2 pictures, to photographs to share with the community. And I'd like to share the first one here.
Sure.
And just ask you to
Sure.
tell the story, because this is from your actual street.
Yeah, so we lived on the corner of Murray Street and West Broadway, and our super, who was at the building, took this picture, and that's a part of the jet engine from one of the planes that landed on our corner. That was, it's funny, I haven't looked at these pictures in a while, and when I was talking to Felix about this, I pulled this out, and it's remarkable that came that close.
And there is a second picture that you also brought here, because as you already described, this huge impact on you, not only being there for work, but being an actual resident of the neighborhood and being homeless.
Yeah, we were, so we call ourselves displaced. Right? We weren't homeless. We ended up living in a hotel for about 6 weeks in Midtown. And then we found a sublet in Tribeca, northern part of Tribeca, through Christmas. We couldn't get into our home. We, Ground Zero, if you recall, kept shrinking. It was Canal Street, and then it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And up until November, we were still in the Ground Zero zone, so we couldn't move in. We did see the apartment. We had left our windows open about this much, but the entire apartment was covered in dust and asbestos. And again, survival mode. You're like, okay, what do we do? We had to get our insurance company. We had to get these asbestos cleaners. It was a big, long process. And the asbestos cleaners had to go in the insurance company, and they said, okay, you can't keep certain stuff. You have to get rid of certain stuff. So we're all in this process of what was going on. And I remember I came home from work one day, and my wife and I were drinking a lot, as you can imagine. And she said, we need another bottle of wine for tonight. And I said, we got plenty of wine. And she said, just go to the liquor store. And by the way, go by our block just to see if we can get in. I said, we can't get in. I know. She just, do me a favor, go down there. So I went down there, and I saw on our corner all of our worldly possessions piled up on the corner. So that was our couch, 2 couches. All the bags were mostly kids' stuff, electronic equipment. And my wife had taken this picture because, just to see all your stuff, knowing that it was going to happen, but to see it all on the street corner. And she told me later, she said, I just wanted you to experience what I experienced when I first saw it. So that was really a gut punch, when you see your stuff out on the street being ready to be hauled away.
Thank you for bringing these very personal moments here, Joe. And I have to ask you, because you have also brought this to Remote Daily so many times, how much you actually took from that moment, how it has changed you, how much you learned, and how you recovered. And what you went through is such a big piece of your life. And I'm going to put it in a very kind of banal answer. What were some of the most positive things you experienced personally in this time?
Wow, there's a lot of good that came out of this. I mean, the sense of community in the neighborhood that I lived in. I lived in Tribeca, and because the kids were small and they went to school, we all knew it was a small, very neighborly community. No one left. No one moved out. And everyone was helping each other. And that was wonderful. I'll tell a story that was, you know, I can get personal about what I learned, you know, about resilience and stuff, but the love and the support that came from everywhere was remarkable. There's a story I tell. There used to be community board meetings every Wednesday. And a community board, for those of you in New York, you know, it's a neighborhood, and you had speakers, and we lived in community board where the World Trade Center was. And every Wednesday night for like 6 hours, they were long. You had Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, you had Elizabeth Todd, Christy Todd Whitman, who was the DEA or Department of Health, and all these officials up there answering questions, because people were like, is it safe? Is the air quality safe? When can we go back? When can we go home? What's happening? Blah, blah. And people would get up and ask questions, and it was a long process. And it got to the point where a lot of the school kids, because there were the 2 elementary schools that were downtown, had to double up in a school in the village. So you had classrooms of 50 to 60 kids, and it was just untenable, and our kids weren't learning. And so that was a big question of these community board meetings. Said, what are you going to do about schools? We can't do this. There's 60 kids. It's not working. This was like in October, late October. And this one woman stood up. It was a friend of ours. She's in the movie business. She's a producer, and stood up at the microphone and very meekly said, you know, not for nothing, but we just filmed a project in a building on, it's like Christopher and 10th on the West Village. That's kind of empty. Might be good for temporary classrooms or temporary school. Could you look into that? They looked into it the next week. They said, yeah, we can do this. Within 72 hours, calls were made to Steelcase Furniture, ABC Carpet, Scholastic Books, and every parent took care of their own classroom. And within a week, you had an entire school rebuilt. The kids marked in on Monday. It was that type of community that was just amazing, right? That was unbelievable. So yeah, and this is why, look, this is why I love this remote daily, because of the community. You know, it's that's the one thing I learned more than anything. You know, 9/11 taught me a lot of things. I'm not to take myself too seriously. Therapy works, right? Felix, I told you the story, which I love to tell. About a month into it, the wives and mothers got together every Wednesday for lunch just to have a therapy session. And one of the mothers was a psychotherapist. And so they spent an hour and a half, and they got so much out of it. And one day they came home and they said, my wife said, oh, we all discussed it. We think the dads should do it as well. And a typical male response is, yeah, we don't need it. About 15 of us got together one night in a gentleman's apartment with a paid trauma therapist. And he said, let's just go around the room and tell our stories. And we all knew each other. 4 hours later, tears, the whole thing. And he said, okay, you all have level 1 trauma. I suggest we continue this. Here's the good thing. The wives and mothers stopped after Christmas. A group of 8 men continued once a month for 6 years. I was one of them.
Amazing.
Kept going. Not that we were dealing with 9/11, but we created this community of men, and we talked about being a father. We talked about being a father of girls. We talked about everything, and it was just this wonderful, safe, healing community. And 9/11 taught me that. because I think I was, prior to that, I'd be like, I don't need this stuff.
Like this year, even though it's a very weird comparison, there was a return to the office sort of thing, to go back to where you were before, and it happened quite, I think, quite quickly after 9/11. So before the end of 2001, downtown moved back into their offices because also, I guess, because remote work wasn't really a thing back then. How did your return to the office go?
And I think you could remember this, but remember Leo Flanagan, right? So Leo and I, this gentleman who I worked with, we were tasked with creating an orientation program for everyone to get back into the World Financial Center by early November. The pit was still burning. I couldn't get into my home. And I had to stand up there and create an orientation program to tell everybody it's safe, come on back. We had, I had these senior executives going, I'm not coming back. Oh, don't worry, it's all safe. We got security protocols set up. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I can't even get into my home. And I'm trying to convince people to come back to work. That was very odd. And the other thing I'll say, which ironically, for those of you who remember being in New York, so the day we went back to work was a Monday. There was the Dominican plane crash in JFK. If you remember, a plane went down and killed like 125 people in Jamaica Bay. It was that day. About half the building fled when they heard the news. They just, I'm not coming back. Yeah, it was tough. It was really hard. It was really hard. So.
What do you think is the main difference between New York then and New York now?
That's a good question. I think this COVID, well, first of all, with 9/11, there was this great outpouring of love for the city from around the world. And there's this great outpouring of love, even for people who lived in the city, for folks, the firefighters who passed away, the families, just everyone. It was just outpouring. It was like for 3 months, there was this genuine feeling of love and caring, and we're all New Yorkers, right? With COVID, maybe the first month you had the 7 o'clock clapping for service workers, but it just seems now people are more selfish. How am I going to deal with kids at school? Or am I going to wear a mask? Or, geez, I wish this restaurant would open. And it doesn't feel the same. I think we missed an opportunity with COVID. Maybe it's because of politics and what our leaders are saying, but the sense of unity that happened after 9/11 was something that I'd love to see back in this city, because I think we need it right now.
Yeah. Well, I as somebody who has only lived there for 8 years, I think that COVID disrupted the very thing, what you just described, just getting together as being a source of power, really, that the city has. It's sad that you feel that way, and I agree, and I see the chat here as well. So that's such a big difference, and it's so hard to, with this virus, create this feeling of togetherness anywhere, I guess, where it has hit so hardly as in New York. And I have to ask you as well. I mean, there was this sort of exodus, especially of Lower Manhattan after 9/11. And we're also back in this discussion right now. How has your own sentiment about staying or leaving changed this year?
I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I love this city. I always had this image in my head, this metaphor going on in my head that when I'm ready to move out of New York City, I want to go to Port Authority or Times Square or JFK and wait for some young person to come off the plane and metaphorically hand them New York and say, here, I'm done with it. Enjoy it. I'm done. I'm not there yet. New York has been beaten up a lot. it's going to rebound. I worry about the next year. But New York has been written off through its whole history, right? And I think people 10 years from now are going to be like, wow, why did I ever leave? Right? Wow, I could have bought that apartment for, X amount of money. I will share, I'll share one other story, which, Felix, I didn't share with you, and which is ironic. I don't know if ironic, if you call me bad luck or fortunate, I don't know how you want to call it, but if you, for New Yorkers, if you recall 4 years ago when there was a bomb that went off in Chelsea, there was a pipe bomb that they put in a dumpster. Thankfully, no one was hurt. It was right across the street from my house. We had windows blown out. Thankfully, we weren't home at the time. But what was interesting, you go back to the experiences when we were out at a restaurant and my daughter called me and said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And look at the news, this bomb went off. And I immediately went into that survival mode again. Okay, here's what we got to do. We got to get changed clothes. We got to find a place to live. We got to do it. Because we were out of our home again for 2 days. So yeah, it's either I'm bad luck or I'm a survivor.
You are an amazing guest, and from all what I can tell in the chat here and in the faces I have looked in here while you were speaking, and just to listen to you is so powerful. And I just want to thank you for on behalf of so many today, share your story and put yourself out there and help us as a community to understand what it means to be a survivor of that day, really.
It's yeah, Felix, and I want to thank you because you asked me if I wanted to do this, and I think it's and someone told me a while ago, it's important to tell your story, to keep talking about it instead of burying it, because when you bury it, your body does crazy things, and we all have stories. We all have stories of that day. I mean, my God, Ida, I know, you were there, and we had to get back to work. I mean, so we all have those stories, and the more you talk about them, the more to educate others. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to tell my story.
This is your applause, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Weldon.
Thank you.
And Joe is a big part of this community. So is everybody of you, no matter if you're here for the first time, you've been here 80 plus times. This is your space, and we would love to hold a space for at least a few minutes here. I know it's hard because every single one of you has lived through that day and has memories. So it's hard to begin and to end. And now when we have a community share, but I would like to ask the people that maybe find some reference in Joe's story, some of you who were very close, some of you who may have learned things, taken positive things away from that day, to share them now. And I would like to hold that space for a few minutes just for you all to be here. And just like Joe, maybe share one or two points, one or two things, just by raising your hand. I see Ida, Joe's colleague. Ida, it's great to have you with us on Remote Daily. You're off mute already, so here you go.
Thank you, Felix. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, from my perspective, like Joe was saying, Joe Weldon is synonymous with 9/11 in my mind. We became, because we're talking about community, the work part, while he's going through all this personal anguish, the work part was him that night trying to call everyone in a training program. There must have been 100 people trying to find out where they were, because they had come from all over the globe to attend one of his training programs. So every night, Joe wanted to find out who's missing. Did you get a hold of them? Did they go? Some of them went back to Michigan. They said, I'm out of here, right? But Joe every night made sure that we found every one of those people, despite all the stuff that's going on with him. And it's a true testament to Joe, like just being selfless, you know, totally selfless. And I think we all felt very connected to Joe too. Knowing Joe's trauma and being there with him through this whole time and then after, like we're talking about with Leo, um, I've never lost my connection to Joe, and I'm not the only one. You know, we all feel that connection to Joe, and I believe Joe when he says, you know, we can get through this again. Like New York is tougher than 9/11, and it's tougher than anything else that comes along. I totally believe him.
Thanks, Ida.
Just wanted to give a second here to think about what just happened, and also to thank you, Ida, for sharing.
I also lost, I lost my best friend's husband died in the second tower. Her daughter is now 27, kind of like Joe's kids, and she's got PTSD. So this is what happened to her. And every year, or like these sounds that will trigger her happen.
Yes.
And then my friend who worked at the New York Mercantile Exchange on the floor, all of the brokers were in a meeting at the top of the World Trade Center during the bombing, during the incident. They all died, and they only had the meeting twice a year. So she's another person like Joe. I pick up the phone every 9/11 and how are you doing? I think because we're all New Yorkers, we really feel this. I remember being on the train going into Manhattan and seeing smoke instead of the buildings, like this context thing that Joe was talking about. The context was blown. I'm seeing smoke instead of buildings. And I remember just crying on the train and the conductor sitting next to me. You know, I think it affects everyone. And I think what's going on with Black Lives Matter, the good thing is that I feel like I appreciate the Black experience better now. Oh, I'm not Black, but I can imagine how painful it is when they see an image that just brings up all of that pain again. And I think from that perspective, it's been a good thing for me anyway. That's all I want
Thank
to
you,
say.
Ida. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing and for holding the space with us. And I would like to pass the mic to Doug, who also raised his hand. Hi, Doug. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much. This is my first time in here, and I'm absolutely blown away. I don't often on this day, take the time to do something like this for myself. And really listening to you, Joe, reminded me of how important it is to tell the story and to do something. I text one of my coworkers every day. Every 9/11. But this has been it's been great for me today. I had just moved back to New York from Los Angeles, and I actually happened to be living in South Central when what they call the LA riots, but I call the LA rebellion happened. And so what you said about helicopters, every time I hear helicopters, I think of that house that I was in that got filled with smoke and embers. But I had started a temp job about 8 blocks north of the towers, and I started on Monday, September 10th. And the HR person brings me to my desk, which is just facing this big glass wall facing the World Trade Center. I'm like, wow, you guys have the most amazing view of the World Trade Center. And she's like, yeah, we're really proud of that. And my second day on the job was, September 11th. And they stopped the train and said, you have to get out. There's a police, I think they call it like a police action or something. And I got out of the train and people were standing in the street. We were looking up at the first tower that had been hit. And then I ran into the office and I got at my desk just as the second plane went in. And what happened is that the woman who owned the company, she was determined that she was going to drive us all home somehow. I don't know how. I don't think she was thinking exactly, but she had everyone stay, and so we just stayed there for hours, just pacing and just watching the buildings. While watching, just watching people jump, and then watching both of the buildings fall, and I just said to her at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I just said, I can't stay here anymore. And so I started walking home to my apartment at 225th and Broadway. And I just remember walking by St. Vincent's Hospital, and where they had all those cots laid out there and empty, and overhearing the orderly say, they're not bringing us anybody. And I woke up screaming in the middle of the night every night for about a year. And what happened for me is that I was approaching. I was 39. I was about to turn 40. I had never been in a relationship. I had been singularly focused on being rich and famous. And that was pretty much. I had made that decision when I was 16 that was going to be my life. And after that day, I just thought. I had a visceral experience of something that people tell us have been people who are on their people on their deathbed have been telling us this from the very beginning of time, right? This is it. You know, there's nowhere to go. It's just moment by moment. Don't take it too seriously. And to me, that was really an idea, an abstract idea. But after this day 19 years ago, it hit my gut. And I suddenly realized, wow, you've been living your whole life under the assumption that you've got all this time. And you don't know that. You don't know that. You just don't know that. And so I changed my life pretty much immediately. I went to September 11th happened, and then February 1st I went to a party, and I saw this amazing woman, and it was funny, I met her at this party. I looked at her. I had an immediate, intense, attraction to her. And then I heard a thought in my head, and it said, "Oh, don't go there. Don't do that." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's the thing I said I wasn't going to do on September 11th. That voice, that one that says, oh, don't do that." What happened is that I got connected to my gut. I got connected to um, my real gut feeling in my body. I'd been so used to, let me flip that into my head and figure out how to work that out in my mind. And this time I'd made a commitment. I'd made a commitment to flip it and pay much more attention to my feelings in the moment. And it's really weird to say this, but 9/11, I think, saved my life, because where I headed wasn't a good place. Where I was
Doug,
headed.
I mean, welcome to Remote Daily. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And for
Thanks.
coming here and sharing this and bringing this story to this community. And you will find a place here to, where people know what you just did, which is showing vulnerability and being very brave and very open. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I know this is your applause, Doug. Thank you. And I know we are out of time, but we are not. I would love to hold space for one more story here. Please raise your hand, and after Doug, it is a good time to follow up maybe with a closing story from one of you. I know that all of you have stories from that day, and I see Derek's hand going up. Derek, welcome from another place where it's hard right now to just be and breathe. Thanks for joining us, and spotlight on you.
Well, the sun came out today about 15 minutes ago for the first time all week, so it's a good day. But I just wanted to say I was on a plane, British Airways, flying from London to New York. I lived in New York at the time, and we were about 2 hours from JFK, and the pilot came on and said, ladies and gentlemen, North American airspace has been closed. No other information. And we immediately, the whole plane gasped, like, oh my God, you know, we felt that there's probably was like an atomic bomb or something had gone off, and, you know, that there was a war getting ready to start. And about an hour later, he says, we're being rerouted to Halifax, Canada. And we went to Canada and landed, and you should have, I mean, if you can imagine 50 jumbo jets lined up on a runway and unloading the planes one at a time. And we had to sit on the plane for about 4 hours before we could get off. And when we get off, there are Canadian Mounties with guns and dogs sniffing everything and getting into the airport. And we finally found out what had happened. And the moral of the story is, when we got off the plane and got into the airport, the first thing we wanted was a drink, and all the bars had been closed. And it was like, oh my God, we need a drink and we can't get a drink. And so they ended up busing us to the Halifax hockey rink, where we get into this orientation as they're unloading the buses. And they just said, only two things we can tell you: no drinking, no smoking. And like everybody goes, ah! And then they said, pick up a sleeping bag, find yourself a place. And we did. And about 1,000 of us were there. And we were sleeping on the floor. One thing that was really funny about this, or amazing, is I'm standing in line to get a hot dog because the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, came in to feed us. And I hear this, Derek. And I turn around, and a woman I had worked with at Bankers Trust Company was in line across from me, and we hung out for 3 days and had a ball. And it was just amazing. But the one other thing about it is that because I was on a foreign carrier, I could not get back to the States, and I had to fly back to London before I could come back home. But the outpouring of love and caring from the Canadians was amazing, absolutely amazing. I fell in love with Canada during 9/11. It was just an amazing time for me. And my wife asked me this morning, how are you doing? And we talked through it, you know, because it gets me very emotional thinking about that day, those 3 days or those 4 or 5 days, and flying back home finally to an empty airport. And I've been flying back and forth to San Diego because, you know, we have a home there as well. And coming back to the airport and having it empty just brings up all these emotions of that time and that period. So that's it. I'm out.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks for being here, and thank you for sharing. I wish we could hold space longer. I think we need to be respectful of each other's time, though. And I want to just thank everybody who also has been quiet and just listening, because I think like everybody now feels an urge to share and to talk, because so many of you have been through such crazy experiences on that day. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to everybody who, you know, was just listening and also letting others share. And that's the true power of this community. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here, for listening. And before we give the stage back to Leonor and Dario for a final song, I would like to give Joe a second for last piece of advice or last share. Joe, is there maybe one thing you would hope for us to take away from today, or one final thought that you would like to share with us?
Advice, I could never give this group advice. This is a pretty smart group. I don't know. I just think sit with this for a while. You know, it opens up a lot of stuff. And for me, you know, personally, I always try to sit with it today, like I said earlier, and let it wash over me. So sit with it. Sit with your emotions for an hour or two. Let it wash over you. Tomorrow's another day.
Thank you, Joe Weldon, and thank you, Remote Daily Community, for you now live the closing of this extended hour and special edition of Remote Daily here in Leonor Dubinsky and Dario Acosta-Teich.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if you have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let show. Oh, lean on me when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Oh, you just call on me, brother, sister, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Everybody now lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to